This is the SJ Childs Show, hosted by SJ Childs, streaming on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Find us on all social medias. The SJ Childs Show, bringing value to families through education and resources. Check us out weekly, where we'll have new and exciting guests. Thanks so much for your support. Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by SJ Childs Books for Children. Visit sjchilds.org today to check out their special needs book collection. Teach inclusion and neurodiversity in this special 7-book collection. Get yours today. This episode's sponsors include Blinky Minky Blankets, handmade double-sided Minky blankets, highest quality and craftsmanship, creating your perfect blanket for your loved one as a special forever gift. Code word The Mouth for discount today. By Dana Ball Legal Services. Avoid common legal mistakes and protect your small business. Dana makes it affordable for your Utah small business to avoid common legal mistakes with business operations, contracts, and employees. Get more information today at danaballlaw.com. By Moving with Autism, a service for autism families seeking real estate and design services that provide support for their child's development and family lifestyle. Natalie Castro is a Utah autism real estate specialist and autism sibling whose mission is to connect families to community support with sensory-friendly designs and relocation services. By Elevation Chiropractic Center. Get started on your path to full health. Elevation Chiropractic Center uses the upper cervical chiropractic technique to get results by identifying and solving the root issues of your medical condition quickly and safely. Elevation Chiropractic Center, Salt Lake City, Utah. This story is brought to you by Water and Body Basics, West Valley City, Utah.
No.
Absolutely not.
Definitely. So just before we start, Carl, if I can just give you a little background about us and what we do. So as Sarah said, me and Nigel are teachers at a special needs school, at an autism school in Wolverhampton in England. And we set up a podcast about 3 or 4 months ago, where we chat with a range of famous people from the sporting world or business world or something like that, and put out sort of a half-hour, 45-minute podcast and kind of promote autism and the amazing things Tom and our autistic students can do at our school as well. So we really appreciate you joining us and spending the time. So thank you so much.
Okay, happy to do it. I do it a fair amount of time, so.
Fab. We'll make a start, shall
We really appreciate it, Carl. So thank you very much. And before we start, Carl, do you want to show you my T-shirt? I bought this specially for the occasion today.
Thank you.
Right, Nigel, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, okay. So
I've picked a bucolic background. We can all pretend.
Oh, I like that.
Hey, that is nice.
Tropical.
That is cool. You're going to have to make do in my living room because I don't know how to do that. You started off in comedy, and I was just wondering, was that something you always wanted to do? Was it something you did as a kid? Was it were you the funny kid in class?
I'm sorry. Can you talk a little more clearly or closer to your microphone?
I'll move the microphone to that.
Okay.
Sorry, Carl. I was just saying that you started off
now
in
he's frozen.
comedy.
There we go.
And I was just wondering, was that something you always wanted to do as a child? Was that something were you like the funny kid in the class, or how did that come down?
I was not the class clown. I did stand out for my verbal abilities. I started reading very early. I read whenever we had classwork, I read the textbook, the first week of the semester, and goofed off the rest of the time. All through my 16 years of schooling, all I remember as a constant refrain was, Carl's not living up to his potential, which was fine with me because I was trying to get by on the minimum effort, and But I noticed very early on that I could read, I could write, and it was easy, and I was rewarded for it. I would get high grades. Teachers would like me. I could write a term paper, in an evening. I didn't have to, do any research. So I had that verbal facility, which stood me in good. And then when I joined the committee in San Francisco, I noticed that my outgoing ways leaned toward comedy. I would, do and say stuff to get laughs. And at the committee, that was our stock and trade. I mean, that's what we were in business for, was to get laughs. So I did. And then one thing led to another.
So you mentioned the committee there. I mean, the committee is a bit of a melting pot of talent, wasn't it? There's some big names that came from the committee.
Oh, there was a lot of us. Peter Bonner's the director and actor. Howard Hessman, actor named Mel Stewart, kid named Chris Ross, who did very well before he died. In those days, improvisational acting, it's hard to think back, 55 years, but back in the 60s, improvisation was to acting what the actor's studio was to the previous generation, when actors learned the Stanislavski method. And then the next generation of actors, or the actors that came of age in the 60s, were all about improv and the rules of improv, and everybody was starting an improv company. When I started, there was like 4 improv companies in America, and everybody who practiced the craft, we knew each other, from different companies in different cities. It was the Premise, the Committee, Second City, and Compass Theater, and that was about it. And then after that, of course, came the deluge. The Groundlings, Upright Citizens Brigade. Hundreds of every 5 or 6 or 7 people that got together said, "Let's start an improv company." so they did. But I was happy to be there first.
I always think that improv is one of the most difficult things, because you're there on the spot and you've just got to make it up as you go along. How did you find that?
Well, you do make it up as you go along, but there are rules. I mean, the most popular one has become a cliche. It's called yes and. Because in school, in drama school, you're taught that conflict is drama. The drama is conflict and resolution. And improvisation, the success of an improvisation comes from the agreement of the improvisers, the willingness to accept whatever reality is put in front of you and subsume it and make it your own reality, and contribute to it, to reply in character and reply appropriately to the place that you've just created out of nothing. You have to be mindful, you have to pay attention. Listening is the more important than speaking. The more you hear, the more you can do, and the better you get at it. And it's funny that in a well improvised scene where the actors are really on top of their game, it's almost impossible to tell it from a scripted scene that they've been performing for years, because every line seems to flow organically from the line that came before it, and the scene builds its own rhythm and pace. And when you get to a blackout, if you're lucky, the light man will realize that and turn the lights out, and then the audience will applaud like crazy. It sounds simple, but that's how it works.
I don't think it is simple for 1 minute. Carl, you moved on from the committee to doing comedy writing. Is that right? Have I done my research correct there?
Yes, I started as a stage manager and a technician. And then I became an actor in the committee in San Francisco. And then the committee came to Los Angeles. We opened an edition of the show on the Sunset Strip in LA, and in the heart of, hip LA, and we were seen by everybody. We got surprisingly good reviews across the board. We got a rave from Daily Variety and Hollywood Reporter, which was the two trade papers. We got raves from the LA Times and the Herald Examiner, which were the mainstream dailies. And we got raves from the Avatar and the LA Reader, which were the underground press. So, we kind of covered the spectrum, and we were doing comedy every night, 6 nights a week, 13 shows a week. And people saw us, especially producers and directors of other things, including the Smothers Brothers, who hired me as a writer-performer, and Robert Altman, who hired me as an actor for MASH, the original film I was in. So, coming to LA was, as we all knew, would be a big career move and would change our lives as we joined the mainstream. Because we were always proud of our kind of collective, rebel position as outliers. But, we got popular, so it wasn't, so easy to be a rebel outlier when the mainstream admires you and wants to see you. So, and the Smothers Brothers, we won an Emmy that year. So it was, that
Was there an appetite for sort of rebellious comedy?
What's that?
I was saying, was there an appetite for rebellious comedy? I'm just thinking the 1980s when the alternative comedy scene came into fashion in the UK. Was it a similar sort of thing for the in America?
Well, the UK had its own tradition going back to the Goon shows. The Goon shows gave us musical acts like Flanders and Swan, and Beyond the Fringe, and then from there it was a small leap to Monty Python and the Young Ones. A lot of great English comedy, along a separate tradition. They didn't come from improv; they came from clever Oxbridge grads who formed their own companies and performed. French and Saunders were brilliant. I stumbled on them. I was in London, and I went to see. I guess I was in London at some period of time when the arts were exploding. I walked into a jazz club on Oxford Street and heard Birelli Legren, who was 16 at the time, playing. And I went to a comedy club in Soho, or the West End, right around there. And I saw French and Saunders and Alexei Sales, and just the people who went on to become the Young Ones. But at that time, French and Saunders were doing a routine called American Girls, about two American girls who see each other at the airport. And I could have sworn they were American. They did the voices so perfectly. And then later I discovered they were as English as all get out. They did a very funny TV series. Their first season was brilliant. So there was there was a lot of really good, funny stuff going on both sides of the pond. And Beyond the Fringe actually they did an exchange with Second City at one point. The Second City company went to London, and Beyond the Fringe went to the Second City Theatre in Greenwich Village, about 63 or 64 in there somewhere. I don't remember exactly when, 62 maybe. But the improv was the wave of the future. Now it's everybody does it.
So, how did you make? Because you said when you were in the committee, you consider yourself an actor.
I'm sorry.
So was it quite natural, sort of moving into acting in films?
I'm sorry. Say again.
Yeah. When you was in the committee, you said you started life as an actor in the committee. So was it quite natural for you to move on to being an actor in films?
I think everybody's dream is to be a movie star. At that time, in the '60s, everybody in rock and roll wanted to be in movies, and everybody in movies wanted to be in rock and roll. It was kind of funny, but the natural progression of things was, you were discovered as an unknown. You made a success. You got on the broadcast media. If you were a stand-up comic, you got your own TV show like Seinfeld or many of the others. Tim Allen. The sitcom world was full of people who were successful stand-ups, who, as a result of their successful stand-up, got a show. Ray Romano. I mean, that's what replaced vaudeville, I guess, as the training ground. So, I was lucky enough to have my feet in all camps. I was an improviser. I was a young actor in Hollywood. I was writing successful television comedy. It was a chance to be at ground zero. I mean, just as kind of like being in Paris in the 30s or 20s, or New York in the 40s. It was a great time, and I looked into it, and I had made a decision when I left college. I graduated, and I kind of made a vow. I said, I'm only going to work in show business. I know I can write. I'm a pretty good stage technician. I was a stage manager in those days. So I'm not going to be a cab driver or an office temp or a stock boy or any of the jobs that you took to tide you over between showbiz gigs. I said, I'm only going to work in show business. And for a couple of years, the most I ever made was $25 a week plus meals, and doing lights and sound at a Greenwich Village nightclub for other comedians. But it was Greenwich Village in the '60s, and so there was Bob Dylan and Peter, Paul, and Mary and Phil Oakes, and the world of modern entertainment was just off. The folk music was breaking out. It's a great time to be alive, I can tell you.
It really was. That, like you said, it was a brilliant time for music. How were your parents with your decision to only work in showbiz? Were they supportive of that? Were your parents supportive of your
yes.
choice?
Oh, yes. My father was a civil engineer, and at one point I was changing colleges. I had applied to Cornell Engineering School, and I'd been accepted on a wait list. I'm glad I didn't go, because I would have had to be an engineer like my father. But I went to Syracuse and fell in and became a drama and journalism major, because they had excellent drama school and excellent journalism school. So I got a dual major in drama and journalism. But my father, who was a product of the Depression, who took a job that he did not like much. He wanted to be a civil engineer, building roads and bridges and things. But it was the Depression. And the best steady job he could get was as an engineer, was working for the city of New York in the Department of Housing and Zoning, doing permits and inspections and zoning disputes. And he didn't much like it. It was bureaucratic. It was nothing like field work. But, he had kids on the way in World War II. The kids, my sister and I, were his deferment, so he was almost too old for the draft. Plus he had 2 kids, so the Army wouldn't take him. His advice to me repeatedly was, don't do what I do. Do what you want to do. Do what you like.
That's a good advice.
Best advice I ever got. And luckily that I was able to do only what I wanted to do. And
I think it's really important that if you get a job that you love, it really helps in life, doesn't it?
And like I say, for the first couple of years, I would get $25 a week plus meals, and I would have to do physical work, hanging lights and doing sound, and introducing other acts. But I met a lot of people. I have some friends in show business who go back to 1960, 61. I think Fred Willard, before he died, was one of the acts that I knew since 1961. Phil Oakes, before he died. These were all Greenwich Village acts from that period.
Mm-hmm.
Joan Baez, Joni Mitchell, all that stuff.
That's fabulous names. We're going to move on to your involvement with Jaws, if that's okay, Carl. And I'll start off the question, then we got some questions from Tom. So I'll just start us off. How did you get the part of Henry Meadows for the film?
I'm sorry?
I was asking, how did you get the part of Henry Meadows for the film Jaws?
Oh, okay. Steven Spielberg and I had the same agent, and he was kind of a pioneer. He was the first agent who believed in packaging his clients together for projects. So he put me together with Steven. We were both clients. And his name was Mike Medavoy. He later on became head of United Artists, and he ran studios. But at that time, he was a young, hustling agent, and he put me and Steven together and said, just, write something, Carl will write, Steven will direct, and, I'll package it. And so we worked together. We wrote a couple of scripts together. I appeared as an actor in a couple of Steven's television movies, just doing, day parts where I would kind of improvise my lines. He could count on me to do that. And we got on well. And when he got the script for Jaws, he sent me a copy saying, eviscerate it on the cover. So I wrote him a memo of what I thought was right with the script and what was wrong with the script. And he showed it to Zanuck and Brown, the producers, and they had me in for a meeting, and they said, well, and Steven and I had really strong ideas. So he said, look, why don't you come on the picture as an actor, like I've used you before? Pick one of the parts, it's a running part, that you'll be on the location for a while. So I picked Meadows, which was a co-starring part. If you look back at the original videos of Jaws, I get co-star billing with Lorraine Gary and Murray Hamilton. It's Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw in Jaws with Carl Gottlieb, Lorraine Gary, and Murray Hamilton, because
that's pretty impressive.
Meadows was a big part. But as I started rewriting it with Steven, only 3 weeks before we started shooting, we took the script apart, and I wound up writing myself out of the script because the character, as a writer, I could see that the character was not as necessary as the Howard Sackler thought. So I wrote myself out, and in subsequent editions, I'm less important. But I was on the set writing, and when the smoke and dust cleared, I had a shared screenplay credit on what turned out, nobody knew, to be the iconic film, most iconic film of all time. So, and still popular and still producing an income for me.
Wow.
I was going to say it's number 8 in the Empire Top 100 Films of all time. The big Citizens Kane.
Well, when Jaws became the top grossing, it's still, it's a monument to the genius of Spielberg. Of the top 10 films, adjusted for inflation, I think he's got 4 or 5 of them. That's unprecedented in the history of the movies. If it wasn't for history and adjustment for inflation, he might have 10. But Gone with the Wind and Sound of Music are still up there, and Titanic, and Jaws, and then all the Spielberg movies.
But not Caveman.
What? Sadly, not Caveman. Although it did well in
Unbelievably. I'm going to hand you over to Tom now, Carl, who's got some questions about Jaws for you.
What's that?
I'm going to hand you over to Tom now.
Okay.
Who's got some questions about Jaws for you.
Hey, Tom.
Hi.
I'm ready for you now.
Okay. Carl, what scene, if you had the chance, would you improve on, and why?
In which movie?
In Jaws.
What scene would I improve on?
Yeah.
Tough question.
Way to go, Tom! Right off the bat.
The point it's
Ready? Go on out now.
I don't want to I don't want to be guilty of hubris, but it's kind of asking Michelangelo, do you want to have David with 2 fingers or 4 fingers, or should he be standing on 1 leg or 2 legs? I don't know. It's David. It's the statue. It's an integrated whole. You start tugging at a thread here and a thread there, and it all comes apart. There are, I don't know what I would change. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot. I mean, it's. No, I'm sorry, I can't give you.
That's a good answer.
Give you a good answer. It's a thoughtful question, but it's kind of like a Sophie's choice. Which of your kids do you want to give
None of the above, right?
They're taking some of your family to the camps. Which kids do you keep? Which kids do you let go? Knowing that they're going to Auschwitz,
Which of them does more chores? Oh,
what's that?
Who does more chores?
Yeah.
Good question, Tom. What's the next one, Tom?
Well, the next one's pretty detailed because I found it out from the documentary. But have you ever found out what happened to the extended Alex death scene? And what I mean by that is there was a scene that was basically lost in time where it was more detailed and dark, where they actually used the animatronic shark. But I've always wondered, is the scene definitely on cutting room floor or not?
There's very few outtakes in Jaws because we use almost all of it. There's some outtakes on the Blu-ray and on the documentaries, but there's not much, and there's certainly not much in the way of a complete scene. There's a scene with the Quint intimidating the kid in the music store, and maybe a couple other scenes, but the movie is one of those things that's like when you're cooking and you're improvising and you're throwing some meat and spices and chicken, you're simmering it, and you've got the stock pot boiling over there, and you put it together, and it's a prize-winning dish that people go crazy. First of all, it's very hard to recreate it because you may not have written the recipe down precisely, and there's a function of so many uncontrolled variables, like how long it was at a high heat, how long it was. There's just so many variables involved, especially with show business. It's not, you can make formulaic movies. God knows the big superhero and action movies are all kind of a familiar template. But Jaws, doesn't fit the mold. It's a 2-act structure instead of a 3-act structure. And it's just not conducive to hyperanalysis, in my view. I mean, people make a career out of it, and there's websites all over where they are exploring it, but it's just very hard to quantify.
Well, Tom, what's next one, Tom?
How grateful did you feel when Jaws became the successful movie it is known as today?
Well, obviously, for career reasons and for ego reasons, I was very happy. I mean, you can't buy that. It just happens. And I was lucky enough to have 2 movies that I worked on become icons. Jaws in the horror action genre, and The Jerk, which is a balls out comedy. both of them are iconic films in their genre. But the Jaws came first, and it's you just have kind of, I guess you just kind of have to accept it and not let your ego get out of control. I mean, obviously it gives you a healthy ego knowing your name is on an iconic film. My favorite thing with having done that movie is when you're chatting with a stranger in an airport or someplace, and they say, "What do you do?" And I say, "I'm a writer." And they say, "Oh, anything I might have seen." And sometimes, if they're nice people, I say, "Yeah, I did a little movie called Jaws." And, "Oh my God, I know." But if they have an attitude when they say, "Oh, anything I might have seen," in that kind of snarky way, I go, "Yeah, Jaws." And they,
Put it back on him.
yeah, and there's no more snark after that.
Yeah.
Then it's then it becomes hero worship, which is a little trying, but I don't mind it. It's just
something you can get used to.
Writers, and especially comedy writers, don't have groupies. And when I was coming up in show business, everybody in rock and roll had groupies. You had almost unlimited free sex. Not comedy writers. That's why they're also grumpy.
Not even after Jaws.
There were a few. There were a few comedy groupies, but very, very few.
Tom, you got another one, Tom?
Yeah. When was the last time you spoke to Steven Spielberg?
We attended a memorial service for Sid Sheinberg together. I mean, we were both at Sid's memorial service, and we stopped and chatted for a while. But like I say in the Jaws log, nowadays the only time I ever see him is we're both wearing tuxedos, and it's an industry event of some sort, and he's now Steven Spielberg. I mean, capital boldface thing, and I'm not. I mean, that's why he hangs out with Tom Hanks. There's a trajectory that you should be aware of that comes with fame. You're scuffling, you're working with a bunch of your broke friends, you're all young actors together, or young comedians working bars and open mic nights and stuff. And you become successful, and you become more successful, and you become a star, and you're still hanging out with some of your friends. That they're letting you pick up the check all the time now. In the old days, you'd divide up the check, but when you become successful and have a lot of money, when the check comes, your friends kind of look the other way, and you're expected to pick it up and pay it. And then pretty soon you reach, and so that becomes a little bit of a bore.
Yeah.
And then there comes a point where the only people that you talk to at any intimate level are only people you pay. Your manager, your agent, your masseuse, your nutritionist, the carpenter who does work at your house, your makeup artist, pick an entourage occupation. But those are the only people you talk to. And some of them will tell you the truth to a point, but none of them is going to say anything that's going to get them fired. Why would they do that? It's a meal ticket. So you're only talking to people on the payroll. Then if you're lucky, you break out of that and make friends who are peers. Like Spielberg hangs out with Tom Hanks, who can afford a yacht as well. You hang out with people who can do what you can do. If you say, let's go skiing in Aspen tomorrow, well, you need to have 3 friends who have private planes who can go. if you're doing it with your entourage, you got to pick up the tab, you got to pick up the hotel rooms in Aspen, you got to pick up the transportation. You're paying for everything, and at some point you become aware of that, and you go, wait a second here, maybe I don't want to do this, or maybe I've outgrown these folks, and you keep who you can, but the short answer is no. Stephen and I don't hang out. Haven't for years, decades.
Good question, Grant. Tom, what was the next one?
Are you planning on seeing the Jaws replica shark at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures? I'm hoping to eventually see Bruce himself.
Well, I'm a member of the Academy and I'm a member of the museum, and I will go kind of when the exhibit's ready. It's not finished yet. But, I'm looking forward to visiting the Academy Museum. They spent a lot of money on it. The shark has a prominent place. They've retrieved the last remaining shark from the junkyard in the San Fernando Valley, restored it. So, the museum is swell, and I'm leaving a lot of my Jaws manuscripts and memorabilia to the Academy Museum.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Carl, can I jump in and ask a question? I've got when we heard that you were coming on, a few people got in contact with me and wanted to ask you a question. So I've got a question here from one of our listeners. Sure. And their question is, why write Jaws about a man-eating shark? Do you think because of Jaws, this has caused decades of fear of a beautiful marine predator?
Yes. Eventually went to his death, regretful that the popular culture took the turn that it did. And the shark became, everybody's favorite villain. And then when we, heard about the decimation of shark population by Japanese factory fishermen in the Pacific, it's like, people didn't really care. Meanwhile, they were just netting sharks by the millions, cutting their fins off for soup, and throwing the mutilated sharks back in the water to die, which was, awful. And eventually, devoted a large part of his time and his estate to foundations to save shark wildlife and all the creatures of the sea, but particularly sharks, which became everybody's favorite punching bag. Although your chances of being bitten by a shark are less than being hit by lightning or having a coconut fall on your head. So, that's the sad legacy of what we did, is to make the shark everybody's favorite villain. And here we are like 45, 46 years later. And whenever I'm introduced to somebody and it comes out that I've written Jaws, the first comment out of their mouth is, "Oh my God, after I saw that movie, I didn't go in the water for a year. I didn't go swimming for 6 months, or I didn't go in the swimming pool, or I shied away from the toilet because there was water." I know they're going to say that. And it's the first thing I hear out of strangers' mouths. And I think it's a tribute to me as an actor that I act as if I had never heard that before. I say, "Oh, really? That's yes, it had a great effect on you." Yeah, but I've gotten that for years.
I've got a question from a listener as well, Carl. And the question is, was anybody tempted to mess about with the shark when you weren't filming, so putting their heads in the shark's mouth or anything like that?
Has anybody what?
Did people mess about with the shark when you weren't filming? Did they sort of put their heads in its mouth and things like that?
When we were filming?
Not when you film, when you weren't filming.
I'm not clear.
Like when you were off camera, just hanging out, were people messing around, putting their heads in the shark mouth and things like that, just goofing off?
Oh, well, while we were making the movie, there wasn't much time to fuck around. I was locked. I was either on the set waiting to act, or I was locked up in the cabin with trying to stay ahead of the schedule and write some pages for scenes that were going to be shot in 2 days or 3 days later, and I had to write those pages. So there wasn't much time for fun. It was.
So Carl, sorry.
You go ahead.
So how long did, from the very first word written down on paper about Jaws to kind of completion of production, how long did it take you to film Jaws?
It took Stephen, I think, 5 months to film Jaws. I was only involved in 3 months because when they got finished with all the dialogue and all the scenes in which actors talk to each other, essentially I was done. What Stephen and the others had to do was stay there for another 2 months or so, getting all the shark footage and all the stuff that happens at sea. But once that boat sails out to sea, essentially my job was over. Except for, of course, the Indianapolis scene, which I had written before. That was filmed on shore. Once they had filmed every dialogue scene and everything that was written per se, every written word was acted and recorded and photographed. Then I was done, and I had saved up enough money to buy a little BMW 2002, a little square BMW from 1974. My wife and I bought a new BMW with my money, and we drove it to California, stopping in Nashville to visit our friends who were shooting Nashville. And then a couple of months later, the guys got home from the vineyard, much the worse for wear.
There are a lot of technical difficulties, I believe, with the shark. I believe the first one actually sank to the bottom of the ocean. Could you tell us any more about the technical problems that you had with the shark?
Again, say?
Sorry, Nigel said were there any technical difficulties with the shark? We heard that the first shark maybe sank to the bottom of the ocean. So was it quite difficult to work with the shark?
Both in the book and the documentaries go on at great lengths about how the shark did not work or worked imperfectly, and we had to shoot around it. And luckily for everybody, Stephen and I were both fans of a 1950s horror film called The Thing, in which you don't see the monster until 40 minutes into the film. So we said, well, let's take a tip from The Thing. You don't have to show the monster doing its work. You don't have to begin with we want to kill Chrissy, have Chrissy die a terrible death, but we didn't have to show a shark for that. We realized we could get as much horror and as much drama out of the effects of the shark rather than seeing the shark actually biting people and doing its shark thing. So in being inventive and trying to find things that suggested the shark just off frame, I think that's part of what made the movie so good.
Definitely, and the movie is well known for its memorable quotes. Obviously, probably the most famous being that you're going to need a bigger boat. How did you come up with that line? Did you write that line in, and how did you come up with that?
Well, for years I thought Roy had ad-libbed that line, and I kind of very generously refused to take credit for it. I would say, look, Roy had ad-libbed it. I'll take some responsibility as a writer because I did create a character, Brody the sheriff, that when Roy inhabited the character, anything he said would be appropriate, would be in character. It wasn't just an actor padding his part, which is, what happened. Then, as it turns out, I was watching one of the many documentaries about the making of Jaws, and there's Roy in an interview in the 80s saying, "Oh yeah, no, that line was in the script." So I said, "Oh shit, I should have been taking credit for that all these years." But the actuality is that Zanuck and Brown were stingy bastards, and they did not rent enough heavy equipment to make the movie easy. Everything had to be improvised. All the camera equipment was on this barge called the SS Garage Sail, and people kept saying we're going to need a bigger boat, because they did. They needed a bigger boat for equipment, for the crew to have their lunch if they were at sea. There was all kinds of reasons for having a bigger boat. And they used to say that whenever anything went wrong on the set, if a light fell down or somebody went in the water, somebody would always say, "You're going to need a bigger boat." So it was a common ad lib amongst the whole crew, not just Roy. A lot of people said that. And then when Roy said it in the movie, he said it at a perfect time. And the cutting of the movie was such that it worked perfectly where it was and became the iconic line that it is, almost by accident.
Now,
that's how.
Oh, sorry, Adam.
Go on.
I was just going to say, now, are you also taking credit for Shark Week? Because, I mean, wouldn't...
I have been saying for years that it is always Shark Week somewhere on the planet.
I love that.
Very early on, I mean, back in the 80s or 70s, people, independent stations and, just syndicated stations realized that there were enough shark between the four Jaws movies and the ripoffs. There was enough programming that you could fill a week with shark movies.
Yeah.
And some enterprising cable outlet or station did it. And, the ratings went through the roof. And in show business, imitation is the sincerest form of profiteering. So it became common to have Shark Week, and now we've got competing Shark Weeks depending on whether you're on Netflix or Spectrum or Hulu. They all have a Shark Week, especially in the summer and especially around June, July, which is the anniversary of the film's release.
Carl, what I wanted to ask is no, they do. Carl, what I just wanted to ask is the theme tune of Jaws is probably one of the most iconic theme tunes of movies there's ever been. Was that anything to do with you or Stephen, or was that like a completely separate company who came up with the music? How did the theme tune come about?
That was the genius of John Williams. You got to remember, of the two talent Oscars, Verna Fields won an Academy Award for editing, and John Williams won an Academy Award for the score. And it's not just da-dum, da-dum, although that's the greatest contribution. On the set, on location, Stephen brought some records with him, including the score for The Seahawk by Eric Korngold, old Warner Brothers pirate movie. And in The Seahawk, some of that epic, pirate movie music finds its way into Williams' score in the 1-barrel and the 2-barrel chase sequences on the open sea. That's very much old Hollywood scoring. But when John came up with the theme for the shark, he went up to Stephen's house and played it for him on the piano. Ding, 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 ding. And Stephen said, "That's it." Stephen was very disappointed. He said, "That's it." And John said, "No, you got to hear it with, 8 basses and 20 cellos all playing at the bottom end of their register, acoustic. You'll get a feeling for it. So come to the recording session." So when you went to the session and you heard "Dum Dum," when you heard it performed, you got it. So and I think, to Stephen's credit, he laid back and said, "All right, you're the composer. You think it's going to work, you do it." And the result was, I think, Johnny Williams' first Oscar.
Fantastic. So it's a very iconic piece of music.
Oh,
Tom, have you got any more questions?
Yeah. So, as well as writing, you've appeared on camera, including, as mentioned earlier, MASH, and also Clueless. Which do you prefer, acting or writing?
do I prefer acting or writing? That was the question.
Yeah.
I prefer acting because almost everything is done for you. You've got a trailer. They tell you when to come out. You stand on your marks. You say your lines. Director says cut. You go back to your trailer, have a coffee, have a cookie. A writer, you don't work in a company. You don't work on a set. You work by yourself in isolation at a keyboard. I described the process of writing once as making ever decreasing concentric circles around the keyboard until there's no place else left to go. And it's lonely, painful work. I don't like writing, but and it comes easy for me. I don't struggle with writing once I'm writing, but it's not something I voluntarily do. There's two kinds of writers. Habitual writers like Stephen King or George Simenon, who wake up in the morning and have to write 1,000 words before lunch. And they do every day of their lives. And they have a huge body of work, much of it good work. Then there's deadline writers like me. I don't write unless I'm getting paid. So sometimes if my motivation is a check in the mail, if the check hasn't come, I don't feel obligated to write. So when the check does come, I have mixed feelings. I go, oh, great, they paid. And oh, shit, now I've actually got to write this thing. So I do. And I think George Bernard Shaw, somebody asked him, does he like writing? And he replied, I like having written. The actual process.
When it's done.
Actual process is lonely and painful.
Yes.
So, Carl, with your writing, then, would you write a film from start to finish, or do you come up with maybe the ending first and then think of the start? What's your process of writing a film?
Almost every film, every project is different. They all have their own dynamic. I remember I was writing a book. I was writing Crosby's biography with him, and I had done a lot of interviews. And I was putting them together from transcripts. And at one point, I still had what I thought was a lot of work left to be done. But I went over everything that I had written so far. And in my computer, I had files of chapters and sequences that I had written that I hadn't found a use for, that were not in the book. And I found this foreword that I had written way back at the beginning of the project. And I read the foreword and I realized this is also an afterword. This is also a summary of the story. It's my views on the subject. I think this fits in right here. So I did a cut and paste, and it's the only time I've ever exclaimed out loud at the computer. I went, it's done. It was just, as soon as I, made a few edits for context, to change it from a foreword to a summary of the book, it just dropped in and I was done. I was done like 2 weeks ahead of schedule because this piece that I had written 4 months earlier worked. But, you can't always be that lucky. And you have to write, eventually you got to, start, it was a dark and lonely night, or however you begin your book. Usually, and everybody has different methods, but generally, if you begin at the beginning and plug your way through, after a certain amount of time, you got a book. I spend a lot of time outlining. I don't begin writing a book or a screenplay until I've outlined it pretty thoroughly. Then it's relatively easy. I put the outline in my computer,
Can I have a charger?
and at the top of I start writing the first page of the outline, and as I write it, I delete it from my file. So now I've got a completed first scene, and the rest of the outline, I can just scroll up and see what I've got left to do. So I work my way through until toward the end there's only, a page or so left, and behind me on top is the finished work, or at least the finished first draft, ready for editing. So that's the process. And a lot of books that I'm reading now, contemporary fiction, it seems to be a trend in contemporary fiction to write out of continuity, to write out of time, to write parallel stories. So a lot more work goes into the organization of the elements than the simple narrative and then what happened, which is more traditionally how books are written.
Fair enough.
You think,
Mine only take me like 5 minutes. So I got lucky in the poetry for children. It's quick and fast.
It takes me ages just to do a limerick. Only 5 lines. Carl, I was going to ask. I've forgotten what I was going to ask you there.
Adam, if you'll repeat the questions, you have the best mic. So what's he saying?
With this thing, I was going to ask: are you still involved in films?
Adam?
He said, "Are you still involved in any films?"
No, there's a couple of scripts that I wrote that are, out there looking for a director or financing, but they're past projects, and if something comes of it, it'll be a pleasant surprise. But I'm not working on anything currently. No, currently I'm just taking care of my health. That's my job. Stay alive.
That's
a very good job.
I have one
Tom,
more question. Sorry,
go on, Nigel.
My question is: if there's to make a reboot of Jaws, if there's to add to the franchise, would you like to be involved with it again, Carl?
So Nigel said, if there was a reboot of Jaws, if you're going to make another film, would you like to be involved?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know the new actors that well. Most new talent now, with the exception of, the spectacular women, Lady Gaga and Megan Thee Stallion and a few others. I don't know the talent, and I don't like their product. I don't like modern stuff, and I don't like the actors and actresses who are making it. So, if I was going to reboot Jaws or do something with it, I don't know. That was such unique chemistry. The actors were so in tune with each other and with the script. Nobody had an ego except Spielberg, and he kept it under control. So I don't think about it much because it's like if you're going to remake Casablanca, who are you going to get to play Humphrey Bogart? Come on, you don't remake Casablanca.
Yeah, once you've got perfection, why
It's a bit of hubris to compare Jaws to Casablanca, but it's one of those films that everybody seems to agree in every forum, in every social media platform, that it's not a film that should be remade ever. And lots of luck getting it past Spielberg.
Definitely.
Before we come to the end, Tom, maybe have you got one more question before we finish?
Yeah. You won an Emmy Award in 1969 for your contribution to the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Where did you display the award in your house?
Oh, I have a little table in my living room, with a little stack of statues on it, and a lot of lucite plaques. There's a little hero worshippers shrine set up, so visitors can see my statues.
Love that.
Fair enough. Carl, just before we finish, is there any chance? So one of our listeners, his name's called Mark, and he is the biggest Jaws fan I think I've ever seen in my life. He's a massive Jaws fan, and he's asked if there's any chance you could just give him a little shout out, a little hello, and kind of thank you for being such a big fan of Jaws. He's asked me plenty of times if there's any chance you could do that, because he's a big fan of Jaws and a big fan of yours.
Where should I do it? I mean, I'll do it right here. What's his name?
So Mark, just hi Mark, thanks for being a big fan. And
okay, you can snip this out of your recorded version and play it.
Yes, I will.
Hey Mark, I hear you like the Fish movie, and I'm flattered and delighted that you do. And remember, if you hear that music, don't go in the water, and enjoy everything about the movie that I know that you've surrounded yourself with, and know that I had a good time making it, and I have a good time remembering it. So keep up the good work, and you'll be part of the general public that makes sure that the memory of the movie lasts for generations. Good luck.
Fab, thank you. He'll be over the moon with us. Thank you so much.
That's so nice.
If is there anything else, or Nigel, Tom, Sarah?
Oh, I just thank you so much, Carl. I'm so glad that I reached out to you. I know it was kind of strange, but I'm so glad that it worked out, because I know that there's one thing I love. It's celebrating our youth and adults with autism, and helping. I know this was so special for Tom, and just that makes my heart feel so wonderful. So Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I'm glad you all enjoyed it.
It's been fantastic. Thank you, Carl.
We'll do it.
I wanted to quickly thank you, Carl, because it's a pleasure talking to you, because Jaws is my favorite movie. So thank you.
What's that photo just over your left shoulder or right shoulder? I can't tell.
That white one. It's of a game series I like, Kingdom Hearts, the second one to be exact.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Carl. I really, really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time and everything you've done. So thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. See you guys.
This episode's sponsors include Blinky Minky Blankets, handmade double-sided Minky blankets, highest quality and craftsmanship, creating your perfect blanket for your loved one as a special forever gift. Code word THEMOUTH for discount today. By Dana Ball Legal Services. Avoid common legal mistakes and protect your small business. Dana makes it affordable for your Utah small business to avoid common legal mistakes with business operations, contracts, and employees. Get more information today at danaballlaw.com.
By Moving with Autism, a service for autism families seeking real estate and design services that provide support for their child's development and family lifestyle. Natalie Castro is a Utah autism real estate specialist and autism sibling whose mission is to connect families to community support with sensory-friendly designs and relocation services. By Elevation Chiropractic Center. Get started on your path to full health. Elevation Chiropractic Center uses the upper cervical chiropractic technique to get results by identifying and solving the root issues of your medical condition quickly and safely. Elevation Chiropractic Center, Salt Lake City, Utah. This story is brought to you by Water and Body Basics, West Valley City, Utah.